The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with tension as Ambassador of the Empire rose from his crystalline seat. His 4 eyes gleamed with ancient hatred as he surveyed the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds. For 3, the galaxy had known peace under the Great Truce, but that peace was about to shatter like glass against stone. "Esteemed colleagues," his voice echoed through the vast hall, his words translated simultaneously into countless languages by the neural links each delegate wore. "Today marks the end of an era. The Empire formally declares the Great Truce null and void. We declare war upon the Federation." Gasps and shocked murmurs rippled through the assembly. A race of tall, blue-skinned beings with silver hair sat frozen in their section. Their leader, High Commander Ra, slowly stood, her hands trembling with rage. "You dare break the sacred truce?" she hissed, her voice carrying the weight of 3,000 years of carefully maintained peace. "Have you forgotten the devastation that came before, the billions who died in the last Great War?" His mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his kind. "We have forgotten nothing, but we have grown tired of pretending that the theft of our sacred colonies can be forgiven. The time for justice has come." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates from hundreds of species began shouting, some supporting the, others backing the. Ancient grudges and half-forgotten slights bubbled to the surface like poison from old wounds. Within hours, what had started as a bilateral conflict had spiraled into something far worse. The hegemony of declared for the, citing old trade disputes with allies. The collective of hive minds announced their support for the, claiming expansion threatened their borders. One by one, the great powers chose sides, and the galaxy began to fracture along lines that had been dormant for. In the observation deck high above the main chamber, a single figure watched the proceedings with detached interest. Ambassador Way of Earth sat alone, as humans always did at these gatherings. His weathered face showed no emotion as he observed the collapse of galactic civilization through the transparent aluminum windows. "Fascinating," he murmured to himself, making notes on a simple tablet. Unlike the advanced holographic interfaces used by other species, humans still preferred their primitive but reliable technology. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Activated his comm unit to find the concerned face of Secretary General appearing in the small hologram. "What's the situation out there? Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive fleet movements across the galaxy." "The Great Truce is over, Madam Secretary General," replied calmly. "They have declared war on the. Within the last 6 hours, approximately 40% of the major galactic powers have chosen sides. Conservative estimates suggest we're looking at a conflict involving 300 billion sentient beings across 12,000 star systems." His face paled. "My God, what's our position? What are they asking of Earth?" Almost smiled at that. "Nothing, Madam Secretary General. As usual, we have been overlooked in the grand schemes of galactic politics." It was true. For over 1,000 years since humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel and joined the galactic community, they had been relegated to the status of a minor, barely noteworthy species. Earth controlled exactly one star system. They had no significant military fleet, no vast industrial complexes, no advanced technologies that the galaxy coveted. They were, in the estimation of most galactic powers, irrelevant. This suited humanity just fine. "What are our orders, then?" asked. "The same as always. We watch, we learn, and we remember everything." Closed the communication and returned his attention to the chaos below. The great powers were already mobilizing their fleets. The war forms, massive crystalline ships that could reshape themselves in battle, were being recalled from the frontier. The bioships, living vessels grown rather than built, were emerging from their spawning grounds. But his attention was drawn to something else entirely. In the confusion of declarations and counter-declarations, he noticed that several of the more perceptive species had begun to ask a very interesting question. Where exactly did humanity stand in this conflict? The answer, new, was both simpler and more complex than anyone could imagine. As the session devolved into open hostilities with delegates from opposing sides beginning to exchange threats and formal challenges, quietly gathered his minimal belongings and headed for the human embassy ship. The small, unassuming vessel sat in the diplomatic bay, dwarfed by the massive flagships of the major powers, but somehow giving the impression that it belonged exactly where it was. Captain Sarah greeted him at the airlock. Like all human military personnel, she wore a simple uniform devoid of the elaborate decorations and technological enhancements favored by other species. Her questions were direct and to the point. "Sir, are we departing for Earth?" "Yes, Captain. I believe our work here is done for the time being." As the embassy ship pulled away from the station, watched through the viewports as the first shots of the new Galactic War were fired. A patrol had encountered a scout ship near the neutral zone. The brief, brilliant flares of weapons fire marked the end of 3,000 years of peace. The galaxy was about to tear itself apart, and as had noted, humanity had been entirely forgotten in the rush to war. The great powers would fight their battles across the stars, confident that Earth and its single, insignificant star system posed no threat to anyone. They were about to learn just how wrong that assumption was. Activated his personal log and began recording. Day 1 of the Second Galactic War. The major powers have revealed their hand. Fleet dispositions are as follows. He began reciting from memory the exact number, class, and capabilities of every warship he had observed at the station, along with detailed analyses of their commanders, supply lines, and strategic doctrines. It was information that would have taken the intelligence services of most galactic powers months to compile. Had gathered it all in a single afternoon of casual observation. After all, humans had been watching for a very long time. The ship engaged its jump drive, and the stars shifted as they began the long journey back to Earth. Behind them, the galaxy erupted into the largest conflict it had seen in 3, each side confident in their superior numbers, advanced technology, and righteous cause. None of them had bothered to wonder what the quiet species from the small blue planet had been doing for the past 1,000 years, while everyone else was focused on politics and trade agreements. They were about to find out. 3 months into the war, the galaxy burned. What had begun as a dispute between two major powers had exploded into a conflict spanning half the known universe. Ancient alliances crumbled as species that had been friends found themselves on opposite sides of an ever-widening chasm of hatred and ambition. On the planet Prime, once the crown jewel of the hegemony of, cities that had stood for 10,000 years were reduced to glowing craters. The collective's bioweapons had turned entire continents into writhing masses of corrupted flesh that screamed in voices that had once belonged to children. The crystalline bombardment weapons could shatter planets, and they used them freely on any world that refused to submit. In the depths of space, armadas numbering in the millions of ships engaged in battles that lasted for days and left stellar debris fields that would persist for. The bioships could regenerate from almost any damage, but the reality warpers could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas, making their enemies' weapons useless and their defenses meaningless. The smaller powers tried desperately to stay neutral, but neutrality was a luxury that few could afford. Resources were commandeered, worlds were occupied for their own protection, and populations were conscripted into service for the war effort. The great galactic trade networks collapsed as shipping lanes became battlefields, and entire sectors found themselves cut off from the rest of civilization. Through it all, Earth remained curiously untouched. Admiral of the Third Fleet had been tasked with securing the Orion Arm, the relatively sparse region of space where Earth's single star system resided. It was considered a minor assignment, almost an insult. The Orion Arm contained perhaps 50 inhabited systems, most of them barely above subsistence level. There were no major industrial worlds, no significant military installations, and certainly no threats to the war effort. Still, orders were orders, and commanded a force of 300 warships, more than enough to secure such a backwater region. His fleet moved methodically from system to system, offering the local governments a simple choice: join the Empire voluntarily or be conquered and enslaved. Most chose submission. The few that resisted were quickly overwhelmed by the superior firepower and technology of the war forms. It was, thought with satisfaction, exactly the kind of easy assignment that would allow him to add another star cluster to his service record without risking his valuable ships in the meat grinder battles happening in the galaxy's core regions. The Sol system was the last on his list. According to his intelligence briefings, it contained a single inhabited world populated by a species called humans. They had no notable military, no advanced technology, and no apparent allies. In fact, his files suggested they had been so thoroughly ignored by galactic politics that most species had forgotten they existed. "Bring us to the system's edge," commanded as his fleet approached Saul. "Let's get this over with quickly." The 300 crystalline ships of the Third Fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their translucent hulls gleaming like jewels against the black of space. Each ship was a work of art as much as a weapon of war, their geometry constantly shifting as they adapted to combat conditions that existed only in their commanders' imaginations. Sensor Officer, a young named Ra, studied his displays with growing confusion. "Admiral, I'm detecting unusual readings from the inner system." "Define unusual," said, only half paying attention as he composed the standard surrender demand in his head. "Well, sir, the humans appear to have infrastructure, significant infrastructure. I'm reading major industrial installations throughout the system, defensive platforms around several worlds, and—" Ra paused, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession, a sign of extreme bewilderment among his kind. "Sir, I'm detecting what appears to be a substantial military fleet in orbit around their primary world." "That got attention. How substantial?" I'm not certain, sir. My sensors are having difficulty getting accurate readings. The humans appear to be using some form of stealth technology I'm not familiar with, but conservative estimates suggest at least 5,000 ships." His mandibles clicked in disbelief. 5,000? That's impossible. Our intelligence reports clearly state that the humans have no significant military capability. "Yes, sir, but I'm also detecting energy signatures that suggest much larger vessels than our briefings indicated. Sir, some of these ships appear to be— well, they appear to be larger than our dreadnoughts." Before could respond, his communications officer announced an incoming message. "Admiral, we're being hailed by something calling itself Earth Defense Command." "Put it through." The image that appeared on its main screen showed a human in a simple blue uniform. The being looked unremarkable by galactic standards, shorter than most sentient species, with only 2 eyes and a disturbingly symmetrical face. When it spoke, its voice was calm and professional. "Vessels, this is Admiral Hayes of Earth Defense Command. You are entering human space without authorization. Please state your intentions." Almost laughed. The audacity was remarkable. A single-world species asking him to state his intentions. "Human Admiral Hayes, I am Admiral of the Third Fleet. By order of the Empire, this system is now under our protection. You will surrender immediately and submit to authority." There was a long pause. Admiral Hayes consulted what appeared to be a primitive paper document before responding. "I'm sorry, Admiral, but Earth and its territories do not recognize authority. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Territories?" Sensor Officer was frantically working at his station. "Admiral, I'm detecting additional human settlements throughout this system, not just on their primary world, but there are major installations on at least 6 other planets and dozens of moons. How did our intelligence miss this?" Ignored the question, focusing on the screen. "Admiral Hayes, you seem to misunderstand your situation. I command 300 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. You will surrender or you will be destroyed." Admiral Hayes nodded slowly. "I understand your position, Admiral. However, I have my own orders. Earth Defense Command is authorized to protect human space from any hostile force, regardless of size or technological superiority." She paused again, and for just a moment, caught something in her expression that made his blood run cold. "I hope you'll reconsider your position and withdraw peacefully. This is your final warning, human. Surrender now." Admiral Hayes sighed. "Very well, Admiral, you've made your choice." She turned to someone off-screen. "Colonel Martinez, please activate the defense grid." Was about to order his fleet to begin the bombardment when every alarm on his ship began screaming simultaneously. His sensor officer's voice cracked with panic as he read his displays. "Admiral, energy spikes throughout the system. Massive energy spikes. Sir, there are weapons platforms everywhere. How did we not see them there? They're bigger than our capital ships." The space around Saul suddenly blazed with light as thousands of previously hidden installations revealed themselves. Weapons platforms the size of moons emerged from behind asteroids. Defense stations that dwarfed its largest ships powered up their systems, their energy signatures visible to his sensors as waves of barely contained destruction. But it was what happened next that would haunt for the rest of his days, if he lived through the next few minutes. The human fleet revealed itself. What had appeared to be 5,000 ships doubled, then doubled again, then doubled again. Sleek vessels that had been invisible to sensors materialized throughout the system like ghosts becoming solid. They were everywhere, behind every moon, every asteroid, every planet. The Sol system wasn't defended by a few thousand ships. It was defended by hundreds of thousands of ships. "Admiral," Ra whispered, "our sensors estimate over 300,000 human vessels. Many of them are, sir, many of them are larger than anything in our databases. What are those things?" Stared at the tactical display, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The largest human ships were indeed enormous, kilometers long and bristling with weapons systems that his computers couldn't even identify. Entire fleets of smaller vessels moved in perfect coordination around them like schools of deadly fish. Admiral Hayes appeared on his screen again. "Admiral, I want you to know that Earth has no quarrel with the Empire. We have no interest in your war with but we will not allow anyone to threaten human space." Her voice was still calm, but now there was steel beneath it. "I'm giving you one last chance to withdraw." Found his voice. How is this possible?" Our intelligence said. "Your intelligence," Admiral Hayes interrupted, "said what we wanted it to say. For over 1,000 years, humanity has maintained the fiction that we are a minor, irrelevant species. It's been quite useful, actually. People tend to ignore things they think don't matter." The truth hit like a physical blow. "You've been hiding. All this time you've been hiding your true capabilities." "We prefer the term maintaining a low profile. But yes, essentially correct." Admiral Hayes leaned forward slightly. "Admiral, you have 60 seconds to begin your withdrawal from human space. If you do not comply, Earth Defense Command will consider your fleet a hostile force and act accordingly." Looked at his tactical display again. 300 ships against 300,000. Even if his vessels were technologically superior, which suddenly seemed doubtful, the numbers were impossible. But more than that, the precision of the human formation, the coordination of their movements, the sheer scale of their hidden infrastructure, it all pointed to one inescapable conclusion. Humanity wasn't just hiding their military capabilities. They were hiding the fact that they were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Admiral's retreat from the Sol system sent shockwaves throughout the Empire. The idea that a single-world species had forced the withdrawal of an entire fleet was so absurd that most military commanders initially dismissed the reports as enemy propaganda. But when the surviving ships of the Third Fleet limped back to space with their sensor logs intact, the evidence became impossible to ignore. High Command was in chaos. Admiral faced a tribunal of his superiors, their crystalline faces reflecting the cold light of the interrogation chamber as they demanded explanations for what they termed the greatest intelligence failure in history. "You claim," said Grand Admiral, his 4 eyes fixed unblinkingly on, "that the humans possess a fleet numbering in the hundreds of thousands, that they have weapons platforms the size of moons, that they forced your retreat without firing a single shot." "Yes, Grand Admiral, the sensor logs confirm everything. The humans have been concealing their true military capabilities for over a millennium." "Impossible." The voice belonged to Intelligence Director N, whose networks of spies and informants had mapped every significant military force in the galaxy. "My agents have been monitoring human space for centuries. They have one inhabited world, minimal industrial capacity, and no notable military installations." Activated the holographic display, showing the recorded images from his flagship sensors. The assembled officers watched in stunned silence as the human fleet revealed itself, ship after ship materializing from empty space until the Sol system resembled a vast armed camp. "The question," said quietly, "is not whether this is real. The question is how they managed to hide it from us for so long." That question was being asked throughout the galaxy as word of the incident spread. The Federation was equally baffled by the reports. High Commander Ra convened an emergency session of her War Council, their bioships gathered in the organic depths of a living space station that pulsed with the rhythm of an enormous heart. "What do we know about these humans?" she demanded, her silver hair rippling with agitation. "Very little," admitted Intelligence Coordinator Al. "They appeared on the galactic scene approximately 1,000 years ago when they achieved faster-than-light travel. They were granted membership in the Galactic Council as a minor species with limited voting rights. Their representative attends sessions but rarely speaks. They have no significant allies, no major trade relationships, no territorial ambitions." And yet they apparently possess a military force capable of intimidating a fleet. Ra's bioship responded to her emotional state, its living walls shifting from blue to a deep, thoughtful purple. What else? They've been remarkably consistent in their behavior, High Commander. For 1,000 years, they've maintained the same pattern. They observe, they take notes, they ask few questions and make fewer statements. When conflicts arise, they declare neutrality and are generally ignored by all parties. Because they seemed irrelevant. Exactly, but High Commander, I've been reviewing historical records, and there's something troubling. In every major conflict of the past millennium, the humans have been present as observers. Every war, every diplomatic crisis, every significant political development, they've had representatives watching from the sidelines. Ra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of her ship. You're suggesting they've been gathering intelligence. For 1,000 years, High Commander. Watching, listening, learning. Building a database of every species' capabilities, weaknesses, strategic doctrines, and political structures. The implications were staggering. While the galaxy had dismissed humanity as insignificant, they had been quietly compiling the most comprehensive intelligence archive in known space. They knew everything about everyone, while remaining completely unknown themselves. Meanwhile, in the depths of human space, far from the eyes of galactic intelligence networks, the true scope of humanity's hidden empire was finally being revealed to a select few. Captain Maria Santos had served in Earth Defense Command for 15 years, but even she had never seen anything like the facility where her ship had just docked. Hidden within a hollowed-out asteroid in the belt, the installation stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, manufacturing complexes that could build 1,000 ships simultaneously. Research laboratories where scientists worked on technologies that made the galaxy's most advanced civilizations look primitive. Training facilities where new generations of human military personnel honed skills that no alien species suspected they possessed. "Welcome to Prometheus Base," said Admiral Hayes as she led Santos through corridors filled with bustling activity. "One of 17 major installations we've built in this system alone." Santos struggled to process what she was seeing. "Admiral, how long has this been going on? How have we kept something this massive secret?" "From the beginning, Captain. When humanity first achieved FTL travel and made contact with the galactic community, our leaders made a crucial decision. We could either announce ourselves as what we truly were, a species with enormous potential for growth and expansion, or we could hide our capabilities and learn everything there was to know about our new neighbors before revealing our hand." They paused at an observation deck overlooking one of the manufacturing bays. Below them, automated systems worked around the clock to construct warships that incorporated technologies reverse-engineered from dozens of alien species, improved upon by human ingenuity, and enhanced by innovations that no other civilization had even conceived. "The masquerade wasn't easy," Hayes continued. "We had to carefully limit our visible expansion, maintain the illusion of a single-world species while secretly colonizing dozens of systems. We had to suppress our natural human tendency toward rapid technological development, pretending to advance at the slow, steady pace expected of a minor species." "But why?" Santos asked. "Why not just reveal our true capabilities? We could have been a major power from the beginning." Admiral Hayes smiled, and for a moment Santos saw something in that expression that reminded her why humanity had earned a reputation among themselves as the galaxy's most dangerous species. Because, Captain, major powers are watched, they're studied, analyzed, countered. Their capabilities are known, their weaknesses mapped, their strategic options limited by the expectations of their enemies. Minor powers, on the other hand, they're ignored, dismissed, underestimated. She gestured toward the massive industrial complex below them. "For 1,000 years, we've been building in secret. While the End and all the rest focused on their petty squabbles and ancient grudges, we've been growing, learning, preparing." "Preparing for what?" "For this, Captain. For the day when the galaxy would tear itself apart in another great war, and humanity would finally step out of the shadows." Santos felt a chill as the implications sank in. "You're saying we planned this, that we knew this war would happen?" "We didn't plan the war, Captain, but we've been studying galactic history for a millennium. Patterns emerge, tensions build, old grudges fester beneath the surface of diplomatic niceties. It was inevitable that the Great Truce would eventually break down." Admiral Hayes led Santos to another section of the facility, where massive holographic displays showed real-time tactical information from across the galaxy. The war was intensifying daily, with battles raging across hundreds of systems. Billions of beings had already died, and the conflict showed no signs of slowing. "This is our strategic planning center," Hayes explained. "From here, we monitor every aspect of the galactic war: troop movements, supply lines, technological developments, political maneuvering. We see it all." Santos stared at the displays in amazement. The level of detail was extraordinary. Individual ships were tracked across vast distances. Political leaders were monitored through networks of informants that apparently reached into the highest levels of alien governments. Economic data showed supply shortages and industrial capacity with precision that rivaled the warring party's own intelligence services. "How is this possible?" Santos whispered. "Because we've been preparing for this moment for 1,000 years, Captain. Every human diplomat, every trade representative, every cultural exchange student, they've all been part of the intelligence-gathering operation. We've built relationships, established networks, gained access to information that our allies don't even know they're sharing." Admiral Hayes activated one of the displays, showing a detailed analysis of fleet dispositions. "For example, we know that the Empire is currently facing severe supply shortages in their outer territories. Their biosynthesizers require rare minerals that they can only obtain from 3 specific star systems, 2 of which are now controlled by enemy forces." Another display showed bioship breeding facilities. The Federation's living ships require a gestation period of 6 months for their larger vessels. Their current production capacity suggests they can replace their losses for approximately 8 more months before facing critical shortages. Santos felt overwhelmed by the scale of the operation. "Admiral, what happens now? What's our role in this war?" "That, Captain, depends on how long the galaxy wants to keep fighting. Humanity has no interest in conquest or territorial expansion. We've already quietly claimed all the space we need. But we also can't allow this war to destroy galactic civilization entirely. At some point, someone will need to step in and restore order. And that someone is us." Admiral Hayes nodded slowly. "When the time is right, Captain, when all parties have exhausted themselves fighting each other, when their fleets are broken and their worlds are burning, when they're desperate enough to listen to reason, that's when humanity will reveal itself as the peacekeeping force the galaxy never knew it needed." Santos stared at the tactical displays showing the growing devastation across known space. "And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, Captain, we wait, we watch, and we prepare for the day when the galaxy learns what humanity is really capable of." The displays flickered with updates as another major battle erupted in the core worlds, adding thousands more casualties to the mounting toll of a war that seemed destined to consume everything in its path. Humanity, having spent a millennium learning patience, was content to wait a little longer. 8 months after Admiral's humiliating retreat from human space, the Galactic War had reached a crescendo of destruction that surpassed even the most pessimistic predictions. The hegemony no longer existed as a political entity. Its member worlds either conquered or reduced to radioactive wastelands. The collective of hive minds had fractured into dozens of competing subminds, each convinced that the others had been corrupted by enemy influence. Even the mighty Empire and Federation, the originators of the conflict, were showing signs of strain as their resources were stretched to breaking point. On the bridge of the flagship Crystal of Eternity, Grand Admiral studied tactical displays that painted an increasingly grim picture. 3/4 of his original fleet had been destroyed or disabled in the endless series of battles that had swept across the galaxy like a plague. His remaining ships were operating far from their supply lines, dependent on captured enemy facilities for basic maintenance. "Status report," he ordered, his 4 eyes reflecting the red emergency lighting that had become permanent aboard his command ship. 12 more systems have fallen to thee in the past week," reported his strategic coordinator. "Our losses include the manufacturing complex and the prime shipyards. Current projections suggest we can maintain offensive operations for approximately 6 more weeks before critical resource depletion." Felt the weight of command settling on his crystalline shoulders like a physical burden. The war that had begun with such confidence and righteous fury had become a grinding war of attrition that was consuming both empires. Victory was no longer the question. Survival was. "What about our intelligence regarding the humans?" he asked. "Any new developments?" "Negative, Grand Admiral. Human space remains completely sealed off. No ships enter or leave the Sol system. No communications traffic. No detectable activity beyond their borders. It's as if they've simply withdrawn from galactic affairs entirely." That withdrawal troubled more than he cared to admit. Logic suggested that a species with the military capabilities the humans had demonstrated would seek to exploit the chaos of galactic war for their own advantage. They could easily conquer dozens of weakened systems or impose themselves as mediators for substantial profit. Instead, they had simply vanished behind their borders and shown no interest in the conflict whatsoever. The strategic implications were deeply unsettling. Similar conversations were taking place aboard High Commander Ra's bioship as the remnants of the fleet regrouped in the Helios Nebula. The living vessel's walls had faded to a sickly gray color that reflected its commander's emotional state as she reviewed casualty reports that grew longer each day. "We cannot sustain this level of attrition much longer," admitted her chief strategist, Bio Commander Ox. "Our breeding facilities have been operating at maximum capacity for months, but replacement vessels require time to mature. Meanwhile, our experienced commanders are being killed faster than we can train new ones." Ra nodded wearily. Her silver hair had darkened with stress, and lines of exhaustion marked her once beautiful features. "They must be facing similar problems. Their crystal forges require rare elements that are becoming increasingly difficult to obtain as mining worlds are captured or destroyed." "Then perhaps it is time to consider negotiation," Ox suggested carefully. "Negotiation," Ra's bioship pulsed with indignation at the suggestion. "After what they have done to our colonies, after the billions of our people they have slaughtered." "High Commander, with respect, we have slaughtered just as many of theirs. At some point, the cycle of vengeance must end, or there will be nothing left of either empire to save." Ra was about to respond when an urgent communication interrupted their discussion. The image of Admiral Al, commander of the Second Fleet, appeared in the bioship's neural interface, his blue features marked by barely controlled panic. "High Commander, we need immediate reinforcement at the Orion sector border. A massive unknown fleet has emerged from hyperspace and is moving toward our position." Ra felt her blood freeze. "Unknown fleet." "Negative, High Commander, these ships. I've never seen anything like them. They don't match any known vessel configurations. Energy signatures are completely unfamiliar. They're not responding to our hails, but they're definitely heading this way." Before Ra could respond, a similar emergency transmission was being received aboard the Crystal of Eternity. Admiral of the Fifth Fleet faced his own crisis, as sensors detected an enormous formation of unidentified vessels entering his operational area. "Grand Admiral, the ships are unlike anything in our databases. Sleek, efficient designs that suggest extremely advanced engineering. No obvious weapons visible, but energy readings indicate significant defensive capabilities." Studied the tactical display with growing unease. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Current count stands at approximately 50,000 vessels, sir, and they're still arriving." Across the galaxy, similar reports flooded in from both sides of the conflict. Unknown fleets were appearing throughout war-torn space, not engaging in combat but simply taking up positions in strategic locations. Their ships showed technology that surpassed anything either empire possessed, and their coordination suggested a level of organization that implied a major galactic power. But no such power existed. Every significant military force in the galaxy was already committed to one side or the other in the war. These mysterious fleets represented an entirely new factor in the conflict. The mystery deepened when the unknown fleets began broadcasting a simple message on all frequencies, in every known language. "Attention all military forces. This is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Defense Fleet. By order of the United Earth Government, all hostilities in this region are to cease immediately. Any vessel that fires upon another will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. This is your only warning." The message sent shockwaves through both military hierarchies. Earth, the insignificant single-world species that had been ignored by galactic politics for over a millennium, it was impossible. But the evidence was overwhelming. As the mysterious fleets continued to arrive and take up positions throughout the war zone, their ship designs became more familiar. They matched the vessels that Admiral had encountered in the Sol system, but in numbers that dwarfed even those impressive formations. Humanity had not merely been hiding their capabilities within their home system. They had been secretly deploying fleets throughout the galaxy, positioning themselves to intervene in the war at a moment of their choosing. Grand Admiral faced an impossible decision. His fleet was outnumbered roughly 50-1 by the human forces now surrounding his position. Even if his crystalline ships possessed superior firepower, which was no longer certain, the mathematics were inescapable. Resistance would be suicide. High Commander Ra faced the same grim calculation aboard her bioship. Her remaining forces were similarly outnumbered, and by the human fleets that had seemingly appeared from nowhere to dominate the battlefield. But it was Admiral Hayes' follow-up message that truly demonstrated the scope of humanity's hidden empire. To the commanders of both fleets, you have been fighting for 8 months. Your casualties number in the billions. Your economies are collapsing, your worlds are burning, and your people are dying for causes that most of them no longer remember or care about. This ends now. Representatives of both the Empire and Federation are requested to attend a peace conference aboard the human command ship Terra in 72 hours. Failure to attend will result in the immediate quarantine of your remaining forces until such time as more reasonable leadership can be established. The casual mention of quarantine was particularly chilling, as it implied that humanity possessed the capability to completely neutralize the combined military forces of 2 galactic empires whenever they chose to do so. Az and Ra separately transmitted their acceptance of the human ultimatum. Both wondered the same thing. How had they so completely underestimated a species they had dismissed as irrelevant? The answer to that question would reshape their understanding of galactic politics forever. Humanity had not been hiding their power out of fear or inadequacy. They had been waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves as the dominant force in the galaxy. That moment had finally arrived, and the war-weary empires would soon discover that their conflict had been observed, analyzed, and ultimately controlled by a species they had never bothered to take seriously. The peace conference would not be a negotiation between equals. It would be the first demonstration of humanity's new role as the galaxy's undisputed superpower. And for Ra, the humiliation of discovering that their great war had been nothing more than a minor disturbance in the eyes of Earth's patient observers was only the beginning of their education in the realities of the new galactic order. The Terra was unlike any ship either Grand Admiral or High Commander Ra had ever seen. From the outside, it appeared deceptively simple, a sleek, functional design devoid of the elaborate decorative elements favored by most galactic powers. But as their shuttles approached the massive vessel, both commanders realized that its apparent simplicity was misleading. The ship was enormous, easily 5 times larger than the biggest dreadnought or biocruiser. More unsettling was the fleet that surrounded it. Hundreds of thousands of human vessels stretched as far as their sensors could detect, arranged in perfect formations that spoke of discipline and coordination beyond anything either empire had achieved. The message was clear. Humanity possessed military strength that made their famous empires look like provincial militias. Admiral Hayes greeted them in a conference room that reflected the same deceptive simplicity as the ship itself. The chamber was spacious but unadorned, furnished with simple chairs around a plain table. No holographic displays, no elaborate technological interfaces, no attempt to impress visitors with advanced equipment. Just a human admiral in a standard uniform, sitting calmly as if she were hosting a routine business meeting. "Grand Admiral High Commander Ra," she said as they entered, her voice carrying the same professional tone that had become her signature throughout the crisis. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Studied the human carefully as he settled into a chair that had been designed to accommodate his crystalline physiology. Hayes appeared young by galactic standards, probably no more than 50 standard years old. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her blue eyes held an intelligence that seemed to catalog every detail of her surroundings. She reminded him of the human observers he had occasionally noticed at galactic conferences, quiet, watchful, easily overlooked. Which he was beginning to realize had been exactly the point. Ra also found herself reassessing everything she thought she knew about humans. This Admiral Hayes seemed perfectly ordinary, unremarkable by the standards of galactic leadership. Yet she commanded forces that could dictate terms to the galaxy's most powerful empires. The contradiction was deeply unsettling. "Before we begin," Hayes said, opening a simple paper folder, "I want to make the current situation clear. As of this moment, both of your fleets are surrounded by human forces with overwhelming numerical and technological superiority. Any attempt to resume hostilities will result in the immediate destruction of all military assets under your command." She looked up from her folder, meeting each commander's gaze directly. "This is not a negotiation. This is not a mediation. This is the formal end of your war, and you are here to discuss the terms of that ending." His mandibles clicked with indignation. "Admiral Hayes, while we appreciate your concern for galactic stability, the Empire does not recognize human authority to dictate terms to sovereign powers." "That's an interesting position," Hayes replied calmly. "Let me ask you a question, Grand Admiral. How many ships do you have left?" The question hit like a physical blow. "That information is classified." 47 operational vessels," Hayes said, consulting her folder. "Including your flagship, you command exactly 47 ships still capable of combat operations. High Commander Ra has 61 vessels remaining in her fleet." Ra felt her bioship respond to her emotional state, its walls shifting to a deep purple that reflected her shock. "How could you possibly know our exact numbers?" "Because we've been watching, High Commander. For 8 months, we've monitored every battle, tracked every ship, counted every casualty. You've lost approximately 94% of your combined fleet strength." Hayes turned a page in her folder. "Your economies are collapsing. Your industrial bases have been largely destroyed. Your supply lines are in chaos. Conservative estimates suggest that continued fighting would result in the total collapse of both empires within 6 months." She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. "You are not great powers locked in a strategic conflict. You are two dying civilizations committing mutual suicide while the rest of the galaxy suffers for your pride." The brutal assessment hung in the air like a physical presence. Both commanders knew she was right. Their war had long since moved beyond any rational objective and become a grinding war of attrition that served no purpose except to feed an endless cycle of revenge. "What do you propose?" Ra asked quietly. "Immediate cessation of all hostilities, withdrawal of all military forces to pre-war boundaries, establishment of neutral buffer zones patrolled by human peacekeeping forces, and most importantly, formal acceptance of Earth's authority to maintain galactic order." Laughed bitterly. "You expect us to simply surrender our sovereignty to a species that claim to be a minor power." "I expect you to accept reality," Hayes replied. "Admiral, let me show you something." She activated a holographic display that filled the conference room with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. But this map was unlike any either commander had seen before. Instead of the familiar borders of known empires and federations, it showed something entirely different. Green indicators marked human-controlled systems throughout the galaxy. Not just the Sol system, but hundreds of others scattered across known space. Industrial complexes, research stations, military bases, and civilian colonies spread across territory that officially belonged to dozens of different species. "For over a millennium," Hayes explained, "humanity has been quietly establishing a presence throughout the galaxy. We've built infrastructure, developed relationships, and created networks that span every major civilization. What you see here is not an invasion or conquest. It's the revelation of an empire that has existed in secret for 1,000 years." Ra stared at the display in stunned silence. The green indicators represented human assets in hundreds of systems throughout space, systems where her own intelligence services had reported no alien presence. "Impossible," she whispered. "Our sensors would have detected such installations." "Only if we wanted them detected," Hayes replied. "Stealth technology has been a human specialty since before we achieved faster-than-light travel. We've simply applied it on a galactic scale." She manipulated the display, showing detailed views of individual systems. "Here's the manufacturing complex that Grand Admiral's reports show as destroyed last month. Actually, it was quietly taken over by human forces 3 days before the attack. The explosion you observed was a carefully staged deception designed to make you believe your enemy had eliminated a strategic asset." The display shifted to another system. And here's the bioship breeding facility at Nexus Prime. High Commander Ra, your records show this facility as operating at full capacity throughout the war. In reality, it's been under human control for 6 months. The vessels you thought were your latest generation of bioships were actually human-built replicas designed to match your expectations. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not merely been observing the war, they had been controlling it, manipulating both sides to achieve objectives that neither empire had understood. "You've been playing us against each other," said, his voice hollow with realization. "Not playing," Hayes corrected. "Managing. Your war was inevitable given the historical tensions and political pressures that had been building for decades. But left to your own devices, you would have destroyed not just each other but half the galaxy in the process. Human intervention has limited the damage to acceptable parameters while allowing both sides to exhaust their military capabilities." She returned the display to its overview of human-controlled space. "The result is a galaxy where the two most aggressive empires have been neutralized as threats, clearing the way for a more stable political order under human leadership." Ra felt a chill of understanding. This was all planned. The entire war was orchestrated to justify human intervention. "Not orchestrated," Hayes said patiently. "Anticipated and prepared for. We've been studying galactic political patterns for 1,000 years. We knew this conflict would happen eventually, and we made sure we were ready to limit its scope and consequences." She stood and moved to a viewport that showed the vast human fleet extending beyond the horizon. "For too long, the galaxy has been plagued by endless cycles of warfare between powers too proud to accept compromise and too weak to achieve decisive victory. The Great Truce lasted 3,000 years, but it was built on unresolved tensions that made future conflict inevitable. Humanity offers something different, the strength to enforce peace and the wisdom to govern justly. We have no ancient grudges, no territorial ambitions beyond what we already control, no religious or ideological zealotry that demands the subjugation of other species." She turned back to face them. "What we do have is the capability to prevent another war like this one from ever happening again." Found his voice, "And if we refuse your terms, then your fleets will be destroyed, your governments will be replaced with more reasonable leadership, and human rule will be imposed directly rather than through cooperative agreements." Hayes's tone remained perfectly calm, but the threat was unmistakable. "You lost this war the moment you started fighting each other instead of recognizing the real power in the galaxy." The room fell silent as both commanders contemplated their options. Outside the viewport, the human fleet stretched endlessly into space, a visible reminder of the force backing Admiral Hayes's ultimatum. Finally, Ross spoke. "What guarantees do we have that human rule will be benevolent?" "The same guarantee any species has," Hayes replied. "Our own self-interest. A stable, prosperous galaxy serves human purposes far better than a collection of burning worlds and dead civilizations. We want partners, not slaves. Allies, not subjects." She returned to her seat and reopened her folder. "But make no mistake, this is not a request for your approval. This is notification that the galactic balance of power has fundamentally changed. You can accept that change gracefully and retain some measure of autonomy, or you can resist and be swept aside." Looked at Ra, seeing his own resignation reflected in her features. They had come to this meeting expecting negotiation. Instead, they had discovered that their great war had been nothing more than a minor crisis in the eyes of a species that had been patiently building galactic dominance for over a millennium. "We accept your terms," he said finally. Admiral Hayes nodded and made a note in her folder. "Good. Formal documents will be prepared within the next 24 hours. In the meantime, all military operations are suspended, and human peacekeeping forces will begin deployment to contested systems." She looked up one final time, her expression showing something that might have been sympathy. "Grand Admiral, High Commander, I know this is difficult, but you should understand that this outcome serves the greater good of all galactic civilization. Under human guidance, the galaxy will know peace, prosperity, and progress beyond anything achieved during the era of competing empires." As the defeated commanders prepared to return to their fleets and begin the process of surrender, Admiral Hayes added one last observation. "Oh, and you might be interested to know that Ambassador Wei sends his regards. He wanted me to thank you for the excellent intelligence your war provided about the current state of galactic military technology and strategic doctrine. The mention of the quiet human observer who had attended galactic conferences for decades drove home the final, humiliating truth. They had been studied, analyzed, and ultimately defeated by a species they had never bothered to understand. Humanity's thousand-year masquerade was over. The galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with tension as Ambassador of the Empire rose from his crystalline seat. His four eyes gleamed with ancient hatred as he surveyed the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds. For three, the galaxy had known peace under the Great Truce, but that peace was about to shatter like glass against stone. Esteemed colleagues, his voice echoed through the vast hall, his words translated simultaneously into countless languages by the neural links each delegate wore. Today marks the end of an era. The Empire formally declares the Great Truce null and void. We declare war upon the Federation. Gasps and shocked murmurs rippled through the assembly. A race of tall, blue-skinned beings with silver hair sat frozen in their section. Their leader, High Commander Ra, slowly stood, her hands trembling with rage. "You dare break the sacred truce?" she hissed, her voice carrying the weight of 3,000 years of carefully maintained peace. "Have you forgotten the devastation that came before, the billions who died in the last Great War?" His mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his kind. "We have forgotten nothing, but we have grown tired of pretending that the theft of our sacred colonies can be forgiven. The time for justice has come." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates from hundreds of species began shouting, some supporting the, others backing the. Ancient grudges and half-forgotten slights bubbled to the surface like poison from old wounds. Within hours, what had started as a bilateral conflict had spiraled into something far worse. The hegemony of declared for the, citing old trade disputes with allies. The collective of hive minds announced their support for the, claiming expansion threatened their borders. One by one, the great powers chose sides, and the galaxy began to fracture along lines that had been dormant for. In the observation deck high above the main chamber, a single figure watched the proceedings with detached interest. Ambassador Way of Earth sat alone, as humans always did at these gatherings. His weathered face showed no emotion as he observed the collapse of galactic civilization through the transparent aluminum windows. "Fascinating," he murmured to himself, making notes on a simple tablet. Unlike the advanced holographic interfaces used by other species, humans still preferred their primitive but reliable technology. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Activated his comm unit to find the concerned face of Secretary General appearing in the small hologram. "What's the situation out there? Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive fleet movements across the galaxy." "The Great Truce is over, Madam Secretary General," replied calmly. "They have declared war on the. Within the last 6 hours, approximately 40% of the major galactic powers have chosen sides. Conservative estimates suggest we're looking at a conflict involving 300 billion sentient beings across 12,000 star systems." His face paled. "My God, what's our position? What are they asking of Earth?" Almost smiled at that. "Nothing, Madam Secretary General. As usual, we have been overlooked in the grand schemes of galactic politics." It was true. For over 1,000 years since humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel and joined the galactic community, they had been relegated to the status of a minor, barely noteworthy species. Earth controlled exactly one star system. They had no significant military fleet, no vast industrial complexes, no advanced technologies that the galaxy coveted. They were, in the estimation of most galactic powers, irrelevant. This suited humanity just fine. "What are our orders, then?" asked. "The same as always. We watch, we learn, and we remember everything." Closed the communication and returned his attention to the chaos below. The great powers were already mobilizing their fleets. The war forms, massive crystalline ships that could reshape themselves in battle, were being recalled from the frontier. The bioships, living vessels grown rather than built, were emerging from their spawning grounds. But his attention was drawn to something else entirely. In the confusion of declarations and counter-declarations, he noticed that several of the more perceptive species had begun to ask a very interesting question. Where exactly did humanity stand in this conflict? The answer, new, was both simpler and more complex than anyone could imagine. As the session devolved into open hostilities with delegates from opposing sides beginning to exchange threats and formal challenges, quietly gathered his minimal belongings and headed for the human embassy ship. The small, unassuming vessel sat in the diplomatic bay, dwarfed by the massive flagships of the major powers, but somehow giving the impression that it belonged exactly where it was. Captain Sarah greeted him at the airlock. Like all human military personnel, she wore a simple uniform devoid of the elaborate decorations and technological enhancements favored by other species. Her questions were direct and to the point. "Sir, are we departing for Earth?" "Yes, Captain. I believe our work here is done for the time being." As the embassy ship pulled away from the station, watched through the viewports as the first shots of the new Galactic War were fired. A patrol had encountered a scout ship near the neutral zone. The brief, brilliant flares of weapons fire marked the end of 3,000 years of peace. The galaxy was about to tear itself apart, and as had noted, humanity had been entirely forgotten in the rush to war. The great powers would fight their battles across the stars, confident that Earth and its single, insignificant star system posed no threat to anyone. They were about to learn just how wrong that assumption was. Activated his personal log and began recording. Day 1 of the Second Galactic War. The major powers have revealed their hand. Fleet dispositions are as follows. He began reciting from memory the exact number, class, and capabilities of every warship he had observed at the station, along with detailed analyses of their commanders, supply lines, and strategic doctrines. It was information that would have taken the intelligence services of most galactic powers months to compile. Had gathered it all in a single afternoon of casual observation. After all, humans had been watching for a very long time. The ship engaged its jump drive, and the stars shifted as they began the long journey back to Earth. Behind them, the galaxy erupted into the largest conflict it had seen in 3, each side confident in their superior numbers, advanced technology, and righteous cause. None of them had bothered to wonder what the quiet species from the small blue planet had been doing for the past 1,000 years, while everyone else was focused on politics and trade agreements. They were about to find out.